What does Chabad mean when they say that the Rebbe is alive?
First of all, it's important to know that these words are not words that Chabad invented. These words have its source and roots in Torah, and it's part of Torah just like everything else. Just to mention a few of the sources. First of all, Rashi in Chumash, in Parshas Vayechi, where it talks about the passing of Yaakov Avinu, at the last pasuk in chapter 49, where it says, Vayesev Raglav Elamita Vayigva Vayosef Elamav. And Rashi says, it doesn't mention death, it doesn't say he died. And Rashi concludes, our sages taught us, Yaakov Avinu lo mes, that Yaakov didn't die. This is the words in Rashi, that every child learns this and knows this when they are studying Chumash. The source of Rashi is from Gemara. There's a story in Gemara that Rabbi Nachman and Rabbi Yitzchak were sitting together at a Suda, at a meal. Rabbi Nachman said to Rabbi Yitzchak, how about saying a Dvar Torah? And then he said that we're not supposed to be speaking while we're eating. So after the meal, he said a Dvar Torah, and the Dvar Torah was actually these words, that Yaakov Avinu lo mes, Yaakov did not die. And he said to him, but if that's the case, then why did they bury him? Why was they saying the Torah that they eulogized him, that they embalmed him? For what purpose if he didn't die? And his answer was, but I have a source in the Torah, and I know this from a pasuk, and it brings the pasuk where it says, Vata al tira, Avdi Yaakov num Hashem, Vatechas Yisrael, and brings a pasuk that from that pasuk we can derive that Yaakov is alive. That's the source in Gemara. So people ask, when the Gemara says that Yaakov didn't die, does that mean literally or figuratively? I would think it means figuratively, in some sort of spiritual way, he's still alive. So the answer to that is, yes, there are some Mefarshim, some commentators that say that it means figuratively in a sort of a spiritual way. But then there are commentators that say it means literally, and one of them is Rashi. Rashi and the Gemara says that it only appeared to them that he died, but being that the Torah tells us, and he has a evidence and proof and a source from a Chumash, from the Torah, that Yaakov lo mes, so it means it only appeared to them that he died, but in reality he was alive. Beyond that, it's also obvious that if the Gemara would have meant that Yaakov was alive in some sort of spiritual way, then what was the question? The question was, if he's alive, why do they bury him? Why do they embalm him? Why do they eulogize him? Well, the answer is simple, because he actually physically died. He was only alive in a spiritual way. The mere fact that the Gemara raises this question is an indication that the Gemara means alive in a physical sense. And that's why it's not understood why was he buried and why they did all these things. Some people ask a question, is this something which is found only by Yaakov, or do we find it by other righteous people too, by other tzaddikim as well? And the answer is yes. It's not just by Yaakov, we find it in other places. One of them is Moshe Rabbeinu. It says in Gemara Soita, Daf Yud Gimel Amud Beis, it's page 13 on the second side, that Moshe lo mes. The Gemara also derives this from a pasuk in the Chumash, that Moshe did not die. There's another source which we have in Gemara, story in Gemara in Ksubis, page 103, on the first side, where the Gemara talks about the passing of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, that before he passed away, he said that he wants to speak to his children. And he said to them two things. Number one, be careful to honor your mother after the passing. And the second thing he said, I want you to make sure that everything stays in its place. My lamp stays in the same place it always was. The table is set in the same place. And the bed is set in the same place. And the Gemara asks, why was it so important that these three things should be in the same place, and that's the last thing that he's telling them before he's passing. It's so urgent. And the Gemara answers because every Friday night, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi would come back to his family, sit down by the table, by the Shabbos meal, and be together with them. And therefore, because he would come back to the house, and he came back just as he was during his lifetime, therefore he requested that the chair remain in its place, the table remain in its place, and the bed or the couch remain in its place, because he'll be coming back every Friday night. And not only that, they mefarshim that he would make Kiddush. And when he made Kiddush, he would be mitzi the entire family. So the mefarshim, and this is printed on the margin of the Gemara, brought down from Yehuda Chassid, but how could he be mitzi the family if there's a principle in halacha that you can only be mitzi someone else if the person himself is obligated in the mitzvah? But being that here Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi passed away, and it says La Mesim Chavshi, that people who pass away, once they pass away, they're sort of exempt from mitzvahs. So if he's exempt from the mitzvah, how could he be mitzi the family? And the answer is that tzaddikim are different, because after their passing they're considered alive, and therefore he can make kiddush for the family. And in addition to that, the Chida in his sefer called Shem HaGedolim brings in a number of sources where we see other tzaddikim after their passing, how they were still considered alive, and things that they did here in the physical world. And just one more example that he brings, the Chida, is that there's a shul in Hebron. Whoever visited Hebron knows it's called Avram Avinu Shul. And this shul is called Avram Avinu Shul because of something that happened. And many years before, there was a Yom Kippur where there were only 9 people there. They had no minyan. And right before Yom Kippur, a 10th person appeared. And they were excited. They had a minyan for the whole Yom Kippur. After Yom Kippur was over, they went out to make the blessing on the new moon. And then this 10th person, the guest, disappeared. And they searched for him, they couldn't find him. And they had no choice, they had to just go home to break the fast. Then one of the members of the shul had a dream at night, and he appeared in his dream, and he said, I am the person who was a guest, don't worry about me. And he said, I'm actually Avram Avinu, who is buried in Hebron. And I saw how much you were aggravated that you had no minyan, so I came to be the 10th person for the minyan. And the Chida explains, but how could he be a 10th person to a minyan if he's not physically alive? He's exempt from mitzvahs, he can't be part of it. And again, the same answer, that tzaddikim, after their passing, are considered alive, and therefore he could be mitzi them, he could be part of a minyan just like he was during his lifetime. So here we see many sources, and that's what we're saying about the Rebbe, that the Rebbe is alive in the same spirit, in the same meaning, in the same understanding as the Gemara says it about Yaakov, about Moshe, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, and all the other sources that are brought down.